for both you and us.
Yeah, so we'll let you know when we're skipping stuff, and then if anyone has any questions or comments or anything about stuff we skipped, down in the comments, because that's how we roll.
Yep, so Leviticus chapter 1, the burnt offering. The Lord called to Moses and spoke to him from the tent of meeting. He said, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, when anyone among you brings an offering to the Lord, bring as your offering an animal from either the herd or the flock. If the offering is a burnt offering or from the herd, you are to offer a male without defect. You must present it at the entrance of the tent of meeting so that it will be acceptable to the Lord."
So, no Down syndrome cows?
No limps, no weird faces, whatever.
Oh.
Verse 4. You are to lay your hand on the head of the burnt offering, and it will be accepted on your behalf to make atonement for you. You are to slaughter the young bull before the Lord, and then Aaron's sons, the priest, shall bring the blood and splash it against the sides of the altar at the entrance to the tent of meeting.
Oh, that is horrifying.
Just slaughter it and put its blood on the walls of the altar.
Why does God want that? I bet he's just up there, he's like, look at these crazy sons of bitches. They'll do anything I ask them.
Verse 6. You are to skin the burnt offering and cut it into pieces. The sons of Aaron, the priests, are to put fire on the altar and arrange the wood on the fire. Then Aaron's sons, the priests, shall arrange the pieces, including the head and the fat, on the wood that is burnt on the altar. You are to wash the internal organs and legs with water, and the priest is to burn all of it on the altar. It is a burnt offering, a food offering, an aroma pleasing to the Lord. Okay, so nextly we're going to move on to chapter 2, which we're of course going to skim over. It's basically just talking about the grain offering.
And when you do that, it's yeastless bread, and it's got to be mixed with olive oil. God really likes olive oil. And then the next, chapter 3, because we're totally skipping chapter 2, it's called the fellowship offering. It's basically the same as the last chapter, chapter 1, the burnt offerings, but you don't eat the fat or blood. Again, it's quite literally the same thing.
Yeah.
It's really boring.
And then chapter 4 is the sin offering. The sin offering talks about various sins and how to atone for them. Every single way to atone for the sins, regardless of it, is pretty much slaughter a bull.
And splash the blood on stuff. Then after that is chapter 5, which is basically don't bear false witness, and then they go into very specific details like don't lie. And they're like, okay. Or kill a bull.
Yep, that's it. Then the guilt offering, blah, 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 grain offering again.
Yeah,
again,
and then they repeat themselves for a little bit, and then we keep skipping forward because this is bullshit.
So now we find ourselves at Leviticus chapter 10, the death of Nadab and Abihu.
And for reference, those are Aaron's sons.
Yes, and they are the anointed priests of Israel at this point.
Right.
Aaron's sons, Nadab and Abihu, took their censers. They put fire in them and added incense, and they offered unauthorized fire before the Lord, contrary to his command.
So God apparently had a conversation with them before, like, hey, don't light any fires in those. And they're like, nah, fire time.
I like that it's unauthorized fire, which means that the default is unauthorized. So you're like, hey, God, I'm freezing to death. It's the desert. It's night. Can I light a fire? I don't know if I'm feeling it tonight, guys. You light the fires, that's a lot of light pollution, and then it makes it really difficult for observatories to see the sky. It's really not cool of you to do.
There's 0 observatories where we don't even have any. Glass hasn't been invented yet.
Well, it might be soon.
Not soon. Not at all. Relative to us, not soon.
Well, for me it's soon. That's what matters, really. Verse 2. So fire came out from the presence of the Lord and consumed them, and they died before the Lord.
I always like stuff like this because it's when God directly kills somebody and then you can point at it, and that's why we read this. So it's Leviticus chapter 10, just read the first few lines. God directly murders 2 people for lighting a fire.
Yeah, I told you not to light that fire. You want some fire? Here's some fire.
Yeah, we'll fuck you with fire.
He consumes them in flame, and they presumably burn to death.
Yeah,
that monk in front of the Capitol building. Verse 3, Moses then said to Aaron, this is what the Lord spoke of when he said, among those people who approach me,
welcome to Sheni V'Chamishi.
In the sight of all the people, I will be honored. And that's set aside a little bit. Seems as though in the original Hebrew it may have been something.
That's what God looks like.
Yeah.
Or
it's usually when they're in quotes like that, they're usually some sort of prose.
Aaron remains.
Anyway, I watched the Kapparot and I thought, besides that the boys who were I watched the Kapparot debates, and besides that the boys who were debating needed to be a little more logical and educated about what they're talking about. Forgot my thought totally. So, one boy argues that many rabbis did do kapparos, many didn't. Well, of course, Judaism has been an open market, but some things we were successful at getting rid of. For example, we don't have animal sacrifices, and we don't have priests and temples and things like that cause a lot of fights. It's a spiritual religion. It doesn't need a place, and it doesn't need a special family. You could be a rabbi based on your education and your charisma, which is a good thing. And then there's a lot of freedom, but we also have the freedom. So I explained to the guy who argued based on the Shulchan Aruch, who was probably a secular Jew, as I could understand, and said to him, Crown Heights is run by the Rebbe. One woman in Malibu asked her shliach, she's a vegetarian. She said, why would you guys do kapparos? And he said, because the Rebbe is the most compassionate man alive, and the Rebbe did kapparos. I think that's a practical joke. The Rebbe didn't even know what happened behind his back during Fabrengens. Little children were repeatedly molested. Worried about chickens now? So I don't know if calling the Rebbe the most compassionate man has to do with avaklash and how to. Kapparos is a tradition in Chabad. The Rebbe, it's very important. It's not easy to get rid of it. I remember waking up early in the morning, starting from a very young age, and it was a very mystical thing to hold the chicken, to swing it. I had compassion for the chicken, then bring it to the shaychet, to watch it being killed. You're supposed to watch it and think it's you. This is a good time to talk about animal sacrifice. We kiss the Torah, with our talis in shul, we get the aliyas, we hug the Torah, we're going to be dancing with the Torah soon. Christians hug their Bible, but the majority of Jews and Christians that I know are decent people, at least those who live in modern areas. So their morality they clearly get from a more modern source than what you were listening to a minute ago about the God who likes these animals. So where does it come from? It comes from the belief that there is a God, and when He kills you, it's judgment, and when He gets a sacrifice or a kapparah in place, He's appeased, He's happy. So this probably harks back even before the Jews and Christians believed, or Muslims, in the omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent God. So this philosophy started with Thomas Aquinas. Check him up. So we had the Shliach here speaking about it, at Chayil Fabrengen, and speaking about davening and how you want to ask God to do something if He's omniscient, meaning He knows everything, like omniscience, right? Then how do you ask Him to do something outside of the course of the universe? And he suggested it might be heresy. I said, a guy doesn't make a yid heretic. If Thomas Aquinas decided that because God is perfect, He's also omniscient and omnibenevolent, He's all good and loving and all that, and He's everything, I don't have to buy it as a Jew. Karbanis, we got rid of it, but then the Kabbalah was not stamped out. Many types of Kabbalah, even Shapsai Tzvi, which is considered by Orthodox to be outside the pale of mainstream Judaism, he was a Talmud of Luria, a Lurianic Kabbalist. His Kabbalah was based on Arizal. Maybe took it a step further. But that's all theology. You could never prove or disprove theology. It's all Baba Mises anyway. Theology is explaining the unknowable to the not worth knowing. How do you know God wants to slaughter anything? I was sitting Rosh Hashanah one of the years when I started to study science. I'm sitting in shul, in a very traditional shul I chose. It was in the back of a house by Rabbi Miller. He passed away, very chashuv, I think he was a Ger Tzedek, I'm not sure, very chashuv Rav in Los Angeles. It was a Sefer Stam, and he was tall and very mystical looking. And he had a shul in the back, and I was sitting there, and I was holding a zayah during the Rosh Hashanah davening, just to kill time, and I looked at it, and it said, in Shir HaShirim, it reads, why do children die? And I saw a video going around on the internet of a woman swinging kapparos on a child. A baby, an infant in a hospital, literally maybe a few days old. And so this woman's doing it because it's the tradition. It's making people happy. A good thing they're not hurting the children, We're lucky with that, with modernity, and we've come a long way. And I thought of the Zohar when I saw this video someone sent me about this kapparos for babies. And then the Zohar asked the question, how does a baby die? Babies die, but how? Because you can't be judged till the age of 13. And the answer the Zohar gives, and he says, Nidali or Yesh Loimar. It's either one of those. My memory is pretty sharp on that. There's Nidali, you could look it up, or Yesh Loimar. Meaning, this Kabbalah is not divinely inspired as we grew up believing. I want to make that clear. It's a very key point. And then, it wasn't even written by a rational person. I read it and I was like, wow. He says, maybe God takes these babies because it's like he uses it's shira shidim about the flowers. He sees the fresh flowers in the orchard, in the pardes, and he says, if I don't cut them down and take them inside the palace, like heaven, kind of like taking the baby's life, these flowers will go bad. And he says maybe the baby will grow up to go into tarvus ra, to leave the fold. Basically, the greatest sin is to leave the fold. That's it. You got to be a believer and a follower. So he's worried that the baby will grow up and become evil, bad. And we, with modern minds, we think, oh, maybe the baby will become a gangster, a highway robber. No, just leave the fold and just be free. Leave the religion or whatever. So God has pity on the baby and he loves the baby. And that's what some ex-Christians laugh about the church, saying that when babies die, oh, God loved the baby and wanted him up there. Same bullshit theology. And reading that Zohar, I had a background of a drop of science, biology, and this vaccinations, reading about mortality, infant mortality and stuff. And I was like, wow. Not only did Reb Shimon Bar Yochai probably not write this, and I really had no background, I didn't know one way or the other. I didn't know the history of a Zohar, neither did I know science. But then I was getting a little bit, and I was like, the guy who wrote this must have been smoking crack. And it really is foolish and stupid what he said. And to even believe that the baby had a bad, like an evil future. It's another fakakta thing that parents will read this and believers will believe this. But of course, the intention of most of these writers were to give people meaning in their suffering. So that's another key point. All this is important. So the argument, back to the argument, is that the rabbis say yes to kapparos or no? And the answer is Judaism had mystics and rabbis. And a lot of the halachists are saying things that are rational, but at the same time, these were just authority people. They thought that they owned the religion, which they didn't. So the Kabbalah was a good thing. Shabsai Tzvi came, and Shabsai Tzvi put an end to the power of the rabbis. He made a schism between the power of the rabbis and the masses. He took the masses from the rabbis. They believed he was the Mashiach, and he said one big fuck you to the rabbis. And out of that, we got Hasidism, which is a very relatable type of spiritual Judaism for the masses, which is Baal Shem Tov and so on and so forth. So I'm reading a book about my Elder Zayda, Shpoler Zayda, I have his name, Yehuda Leib, and there's a beautiful Hasidic story about kapparos, how the Hasidic Rebbes take their students to watch, I think it was at Lev Yitzchak Berditchev, if I'm not mistaken, to watch the guy, the innkeeper. These are just basically Amirats and people that didn't know how to keep much. When you go on Shlichus, if you guys travel, you see Jews who keep a little bit and they don't know they're not really familiar with the religion, but they keep stuff and they believe in the same God as you do. And he says how he took a book and he swung it over his head and he said, God, you did this and I did that. And Simon Jacobson writes it in the Weekend Review. It's a beautiful story. People appreciate that. We learned nothing from that story. It's a beautiful story. It's relevant today when you're making a huge Chilul Hashem with the chickens practice, which is completely not just nonsense but cruel. Remember, those are two key words I use in religion. Some things are just nonsense and some things are cruel. And they usually relate to each other, but you got to remember, some are going to never be cruel, but it's always going to be nonsense. And some things are nonsense and they turn into cruelty. Talking about kapparos and swinging over the head, I got a nice gift from someone, anonymous donor, really anonymous. He doesn't put his name. He writes, Rabbi, as much as I'll eat Bimchal Shabbos B'far Hesed, they're going to still call me Harav Goyin and Harav Chassid. Gave me a $500 money order? Come on, get that, camera, get that, catch that, yeah. So, and a beautiful note he writes after the happy holidays. He writes, Continue to do your good work, breaking the klipot that are holding us back. So klipot are husks, and the Kabbalists use these as concepts. They're not always bad, they're not always holding you back. But the camera can't catch this, huh? Yeah. Anyway, thank you very much, anonymous donor, and no more donations. I started this channel, Shaloi Lishma. I was thinking of making money, and now I'm doing it Lishma. No more donations. I'm just doing it for God. Anyway, have an excellent Yom Kippur. Be forgiven and forgive.